Gustavo knew all the right answers about God. Growing up in a Christian home, he attended church weekly and could recite Bible verses from memory. Yet faith felt distant, something he understood intellectually, but not personally. This changed when he enrolled at a Seventh-day Adventist high school in northeastern Brazil.
Even before I came, I didn't want to come. My mom kind of forced me. But later, I understood that she knew what was best for me.
Here, faith isn't confined to the classroom. It's actively lived out. The school emphasizes a mission spirit, encouraging students to engage in various outreach programs. Through beach cleanups, health fairs, and community service projects, students experience the joy of serving others. Initially, Gustavo participated to fit in with his peers. However, as he served, he began to feel something new. God was no longer an abstract concept. He became real and present in Gustavo's life.
After participating in mission activities, I understood the purpose that God had for me. It was something I never imagined I'd do in life, to be involved in mission.
Now Gustavo is more than just a student. He leads Bible studies, shares his faith, and finds profound joy in serving others. Although the school is equipped with resources to get students involved, there's still a significant challenge. The school lacks a dedicated church building, forcing worship services into inadequate spaces that can't accommodate all students, let alone the broader community. This 13th Sabbath, you can help transform the situation. Your offering will contribute to building a new church, a sanctuary where students like Gustavo can worship, grow, and invite others to experience Jesus. When students meet Jesus, their lives change, just as Gustavo's did. Gustavo's perspective changed from God as a distant God to being much more than that.
After I learned more about the mission, I understood that he wasn't just that. He was a friend. I had someone to talk to. It's much more of a relationship or friendship.
Thank you for your 13th Sabbath offering. Together, we can build a place of worship in Brazil.
Okay. Am I on yet? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Really small group here today, don't we?
So far.
So far, anyway.
The cold makes people move.
Well, it makes me move slow too. I was slow getting out of the house this morning. So slow that both Danny called me and Christy called me and said, "So, where are you?" So I guess I was not keeping up. Okay, everybody have a good week?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those. Some good, some not so good. How are you today?
I'm good.
Are you good? I'm glad you're here. Real glad you're here. If you hear noise back here, it's because Danny's being trained in the microphones and the sound system. So isn't that great?
Yes.
I think so too. Okay. Whew. Got wispy hairs that will not behave themselves. There we go. I think I finally got it. All right. How about if we have a word of prayer before we open our Bibles and study this lesson? Want to come in or just getting ready to pray before we study? Shall we bow our heads? Father in heaven, we're so privileged to be able to come into your sanctuary this morning. guide us and direct us. Send your Holy Spirit to speak to us and to enlighten us, and to help us understand a very difficult subject. Be with us and help us to keep your Sabbath and receive a blessing today that will carry us throughout the week. We ask this in your holy name. Good morning. People are still coming in. Come on in, Jamie. Okay, we're on lesson 5. This is a part 2 to what we studied last week. How many remember what last week was all about? War. The idea of holy war, or divine war, and how last week we studied how it was in relationship to the great controversy, and how that's going on all the time, and we don't see all of that. And part of what we have to accept about war in the Bible has to be taken into consideration, the great controversy. So this week we're going to mostly be studying the idea of war, holy war, in importance to God's character, so that we can balance out what we hear in the Bible, especially in Joshua. We can balance out what we hear that sounds atrocious, it sounds awful, it sounds, thousands of people killed in the act of war. It's a godly war, and then balance that out to how we believe in God's character. But because we have the big picture of the entire Bible, we get a chance to see this in the light of the entire Bible. And God's character is through the entire Bible. God's true character. And his true character did the destruction part, and his true character loves us to pieces. So we have to find common ground with that. And I'm going to have to get a cough drop. Not good for the fun. No, I didn't. What? Oh, I don't want to become a little fun. I was going to just get a cough drop in my mouth. My daughter will get me some water. Okay. So last week we studied it in relationship to the great controversy. This week we're going to get into the idea of it being divine war, but in able to understand God's character that has to shine through so that we can understand the big picture. Okay, how evil were the people of Canaan before the children of Israel crossed over? Oh, bless your heart.
Sacrifice? Man, that's pretty rough.
Okay, we tend to find that, don't we? We zoom right in on child sacrifice, babies being sacrificed, firstborn.
I think we're a little too hard on the people in the Old Testament, because what has our country been doing since the 1950s? We've been sacrificing children to God. So we don't know how many hundreds, thousands, millions of babies have been aborted. And that's the same thing as child sacrifice. There's not much difference, because it's all connected to what you believe and what's okay and what's so we're just as barbaric.
We're just as barbaric, and we're getting nothing but
make it cleaner and prettier.
And we are getting more and more like them as we progress towards the end of time. Yeah. And think of human trafficking and children being trafficked. You know, so it's not just the unseen part of what goes on in a doctor's office. This is what we can actually visualize these children being put into transport trucks and moved across to be, you know, it's just a horrible thing. So we do have parallels between what was happening in the early history of the children of Israel and then now. Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that the children, I mean, the people of Canaan, the wicked people, that they had time to confess and to make their path easier than being totally destructed, right? So let's go to Genesis 15, verse 16. It's just one verse. We're going to see. How many noticed in the lesson this week that there were a lot of text to look up?
Yeah.
I mean, did anybody go, oh my goodness? If you're a teacher, you're going, there's no way we have time to look up all of these. So I've picked out a few from each of the sections to go over so that we are not going to read all of them. But let's go ahead into Genesis 15, verse 16. I'll tell you, from Sunday till now, I'm not sure I'm remembering absolutely all of these either, because I did go over it some last night, but I didn't go back and reread absolutely everything. So Genesis 15, 16, and what does that say?
And they shall come back here in the fourth generation for the iniquity of the Amorites. Like that.
Okay, this was when they were talking about the Amorites and how they weren't quite wicked enough for God to place a total annihilation curse on them. And he said, how many generations? For about how many years is that?
400 years. What is a generation? 40 years?
Well, there's a big controversy. Some people say a generation is 40 years. I say it's 100 because that's what the scripture here that we're talking about
Before.
suggests.
So,
So 100 years is a
for
generation.
about 400 years. What else was 400 years? They were captive in Egypt for 400 years, right? So we know that during that 400 years, the children of Israel got further and further away from God, but yet God went in and brought them out of it anyways. He gave the children of the people of Canaan, he wanted to say the children of Canaan, referring to Israelites, and this is before that. This is the people of Canaan that were there first. God gave them 400 years to find another way out, right? Let's also read Ezra 9:11. I think that's the other one I want. Ezra, Nehemiah.
I have.
Okay, could you read that for me, please?
Sure. You gave to your servants prophets who said the land you for enemies possess is and polluted by the corruption, by their detestable practices. They have filled it with their conspiracy.
Okay, so this is talking about that they were full of corruption, right? And what was it saying about it at the very beginning of that? Polluted. Okay, so these are telling us about God's larger plan, that originally he wanted to give them time to repent. And we're going to get into that a little bit more when we get over to Tuesday's lesson, because that's the one that talks about the two different ways. But we need to look beyond the book of Joshua completely understand what was meant by the iniquity of the nation inhabiting Canaan. These nations' abhorrent practices of child sacrifice, sorcery, witchcraft, all of these things, spiritualism, all these things that they were participating in, and how they finally reached a point that judgment had to happen. And we think of judgment. Let's talk about God being the judge. How many? I don't want to hear the stories necessarily, but how many have had to be in front of a judge in civil court or criminal court or anywhere? Okay, so you could have been there as a witness. You could have been there as the defendant. Could have been either side, right? How much is it important that you really hope and pray you get a good judge?
That'd be nice.
I mean, we went through this with the child custody case that we went through with Christy. We always prayed that we would get the right judge. One time the whole thing was canceled because the judge wasn't available. And I said, well, that judge probably just wasn't the right judge, because we're praying always for the right judge, because there was no jury. It was a civil case. So there's no jury, just a judge making a decision. So when we then think of God being the judge, what can we be sure of? Fairness. What else? Huh?
We also have Jesus
And we also have Jesus.
as our lawyer.
Yeah, he's our lawyer that's standing up for us. God is the judge, and what's going on with him? Is he looking out for our best interest? Always, right?
Those wicked people that we've been talking was trying 400 years. They wasn't.
It wasn't
He
cut.
wasn't watching his wife.
wasn't
saying,
cut
"Oh,
and
I
dry."
can't wait till I get to kill him."
Mm-hmm.
No, it's more constant preaching.
And what was also brought up in this week's lesson, I don't like to talk with something in my mouth. Unfortunately, one of the medicines I'm on just fries me right out real fast. Okay. These other nations, everything was wrapped up in their God. They wanted protection. There was a lot of fighting going on. It wasn't like you were all peaceful nations with each other. They were warring with each other too, right? So they didn't want war. So they wanted to appease their God. And a lot of these things that were so absolutely horrendous for us to think about was because they were trying to please the God so they could be left alone and just live their life in peace. They wanted a life of peace, but they went about it worshiping a God that they thought they had to do these horrible things to appease them and to give them what they really wanted was a good outcome. Okay, so then here we're getting into the Supreme Judge on Monday's lesson. Let's read Genesis 18:25. Okay, anybody want to read that with me? No, I don't think you're in the right place. No, Genesis.
Oh, that's
Anybody else have Genesis 18?
Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death for wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you, shall not the judge of all the earth what he does.
Okay, who's asking this question? What, anybody? Abraham's asking, right? Okay, so Abraham is one, this is when God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham's going, what? You're going to get rid of the righteous people along with the wicked? And he negotiated with God, didn't he? Now, he had a pretty good relationship with God if he thought he could negotiate with God, although I think we do it a lot too. We say, Lord, if you'll just answer this prayer, this is what I'll do. I'll be in church every week. I'll study my lesson every week or whatever. But Abraham negotiated with God, and what was he able to accomplish? He said, if you can find at least 10, got it down to 10, right? I won't destroy. But then how many actually? 3. Taking off.
You know,
There's 2 daughters and Lot. And
take
Lot's
off
wife.
his wife.
Lot's wife got out, but
She looked
like
back.
that.
Yeah.
She
So
looked
she
back
really
to what
didn't
she
get away.
lost. Thought she was-
Okay, so we know that Abraham asked the hard questions. He says, why would you do this? And that's pretty bold of Abraham to ask God his intentions. Why would you do it? But we tend to ask why too. When something's going on that just seems insurmountable. I mean, just insurmountable. Do we just not say a word to God about it? And we just take it on the chin and not ask God the hard questions?
I have actually asked any time, one of my questions, this lesson was very good. One of my questions was, why would God give or promise somebody else's life? Not, I know, full earth is God, but I'm just saying, why would he promise these people somebody else's land? It's already inhabited. So I never got that. It just seems like, why didn't you just go ahead and give them land that wasn't occupied? It doesn't make sense. But I also was asking, and I've asked every time I read the Old Testament, especially, this God who we think is loving and caring, that's the God I serve, or at least I'm hoping to. How is it that he wants to hamstring horses? So this lesson, I felt like answered those questions, and at least to a point where I got a better understanding. For one thing, just like the land inhabited. But, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but the war started in heaven. So I'm thinking, those who are saved will be inhabiting a land that they didn't, that was previously occupied. So there's probably that. The fact that they were given lots of hundreds of years, I never got that God was working with them too, which I think is very essential to understanding that, and just like us, and what are we today looking for? I'm looking forward to the end of time where the evil people are out of the picture because I'm sick of them, So, yeah, it made better sense. I like this lesson of all the lessons. It answers questions.
Well, that's one of the reasons we study together, isn't it?
Right.
We take the subjects. This lesson asks the hard questions. This week and last week, it asks the hard questions. But unless we can defend this God from the Old Testament, and people come at us and say, why does God allow evil? Or why does God, you get bombarded with questions. We need to understand.
Well, it's genocide.
Yes.
Really, he was, so it's hard for you to get your mind around that.
It is.
But just like this guy was saying, sorry. So he was saying that, that really went through my head, that is a form of child sacrifice. And it was kind of, wow, those are the things, the sex trafficking. And look at our television. Our television is inundated with just
How many hated the
violence.
commercials for the last couple of weeks because of Halloween? Didn't you just go? Some of those commercials, and they were during times that children were watching. I thought, why doesn't somebody stop these wretched commercials?
Because we are acclimated to them.
Yes.
We're acclimated.
Yep. Yep, we are
so it's
desensitized.
not
That's
as
exactly right.
repulsive as it used to be. It just isn't. You know?
I mean, in my day, any swear words were absolutely not allowed on TV at all.
Right.
I mean, they took cigarette commercials off of TV because it led to cancer, and they said, nope, we're not going to advocate cigarettes. Back in the 60s, it was wiped off television. But then little by little, these words started coming in, and now almost all of them are accepted in certain movies with an R-rated. They are permitted. Horrible foul language and all of that is very permitted.
But it's very common. I mean, honestly, I was raised in an environment where cuss words were not a big deal. I mean, that's how we talked. And drop the F-bomb like it was water. It was not a big deal. So it's just, I think it's what you're,
I've told people that I had not heard, I literally had not heard a swear word till I went to college. Because I went through
Right.
elementary school was church school, and academy, 4 years of boarding house academy. I truly never heard a swear word till I was in college.
Yeah,
I went to Adelphi in Michigan.
Health. Okay. But praise God, you never heard a curse.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, and we had some worldly girls on that bottom floor my freshman year, but I didn't hear it, and I don't know whether God just didn't let me hear it. Maybe maybe He was saving me to not go through any kind of that negativity during very impressionable years.
Well, see, and it was like you were saying earlier that the people were their God, the kingdom, but it could also be that those people, that's their lifestyle. It wasn't even necessarily that they were trying to gods. I mean, some were, but others.
They just wanted a good.
They
They just
it's
wanted.
not about getting peace, because their definition of peace would not be yours.
Mhm.
You who come from an Adventist, your little life, versus somebody.
My life wasn't very good, but I came from
the definitions are different. The perspective is different.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. Yeah, the lifestyle is different.
You always think
I was very blessed with how I was raised. Very, very blessed in how I was raised.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I had a hard life. At age 16, I was given 2 months to live by Mayo Clinic. So, I've been through a lot in that time that I was blessed. But I was richly blessed. What's that?
Been a long few months.
I sent that doctor a Christmas card for about 10 years. 6 or 7 years at least. And finally I wrote, I said, I'm tired of sending these to you. I think I've made my point.
And I was diagnosed to be blind by the time I turned 18. I'm
Uh-huh.
driving. And I'm 57.
So that's exactly right. And then the questions that this idea of, do we ask God why? When my husband was given a terminal diagnosis on day 1, I mean, we didn't have any time to think about whether he was going to die with that cancer or not. We were just told. And sure enough, I lost him. So it's easy to say, why my husband? He was a good man, and he was, I know. He was a great guy, and I was so blessed to have him in my life. And so why him? You could go on like that. And, I was only given 2 months to live at 16. At 29, I signed a permission slip to have surgery that they wrote death in black Sharpie letters up at the top, and I had to sign that thing. So I've been through a lot, but I lived, and my husband, who is as precious as they come, I lost him. I don't understand.
And those questions that the world asks us. Why did you go?
Mhm.
Why is there death? These are very difficult questions at times for a Christian to answer.
But he did come through you.
He did. He was
And he
not an
got baptized.
Adventist, And he came to church every Sabbath, all
They have a remarkable love.
for years before, several years before his diagnosis. He came here every Sabbath with me, always. He says, where else would I be? You can't talk me into being somewhere else other than where you are. If I'm not working, I'm with you. And so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then he got his diagnosis. All of us knew him. I mean, this church knew my husband before the diagnosis. And then this church just loved him so much. That love was so amazing. And he was baptized. He was baptized before, he was already taking Bible studies before the illness. So, you know, this church, between my influence and this church loving him so much. And he was a paramedic that had just compassion coming out of him. He was just such a compassionate man. And it showed up. It's a hard one to lose. Been 9.5 years. And yeah, hard man to even think about replacing. It's not going to happen, I don't think. Okay, let's get over to this idea of dispossession. In other words, dispossession means get rid of where you are and take possession somewhere else. That's what God originally wanted. Let's read Exodus. Let's start with Exodus 23. Exodus 23.
That made me think of that war that happened in heaven. I mean, at first, God does displace the evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that was, I mean, really had to destroy them. But that was his original thing. Something out.
He got them out of heaven, didn't he? Because he didn't want the corruption.
Right.
And it's the same with the children of Israel. He didn't want them to be corrupted by the surrounding nations. And they were evil, and they would have been corrupted because we all are innately evil.
The same with Samson.
Mm-hmm.
He was forewarned not to go mingle with the Philistines. They corrupted.
And he even married into them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to Exodus 23, verses 28 to 30. A little bit longer than we've been reading, but let's get this, okay? Where are we? 28. My Bible, the verses are all within it. I know what Here we go.
What is it now?
Exodus 23, or 28 to 30. Let's go ahead and start with 27. Let's do 27 to 30. Anybody want to read that for me?
23, 27, Exodus.
This time it's Exodus. Right.
Okay. I will send my fear before thee, and I will destroy all people to whom thou shalt come. And I will make all thine enemies turn their back to thee. And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite, the Hittite from before thee. And I will not drive them out from before thee here, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply. By little, I will drive them out till thou be increased in here.
Okay, my Bible says until you'll be increased enough to take possession of the land. Was there anywhere in that text from those verses that says, I'm going to send out the command to kill? Was there anything in there about killing?
No.
Not one thing, right?
Right.
And that lets you know, I got mine. Thank you. That lets you know that wasn't God's original. And so this dispossession is the idea of moving them somewhere else. But then, of course, we know that the story changed. And a lot of it was to avoid contamination of God's people. he had spent, also, one of the other things, when they first came out of Egypt, they complained a lot, right? They would see God's miraculous leading. I mean, whoo, pillar of fire at night. I mean, my goodness, that's a pretty good thing when the desert gets full, right?
Yeah.
And clouds by day, that's a pretty good thing to keep the heat away in the daytime, right? Manna, quail, water, all the things that God constantly gave them assurance that he was in their corner. He wanted them to survive. He wanted them to worship him. That's what he wanted more than anything, is to be worshiped. And during the time that first stretch, the Canaanites had been entertained by prophets. They had been entertained by a lot of the prophets talking, or some of the Old Testament prophets. But they had been instructed. And so then during the time that they were traveling to the promised land, because they had been intermingling with prophets, they were afraid. They were actually afraid, and I think a lot of them did leave. I think the ones that feared God got out. They got out. But then when they turned against God, and they said, oh, we can't take that land. They're full of giants and high walls and all the reasons that they came up with. Then they had another 40 years. And during that 40 years, the people of Canaan lost all respect for how the children of Israel were going to accept God to fight their battles for them. They were afraid initially. But then they saw 40 years. That's an entire generation, or pretty close to a generation of adults that did not want to worship God, and they lost their lives because of it.
They saw their weakness.
They saw their weakness, exactly.
Right. They saw that it's the difference between being somebody who's a Christian and walks the walk, somebody who talks it, and you can tell that they're not genuine. You don't want anything to do with that. You want something, you have respect for the guy that is walking the walk, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
He's our hero of the story, but the one who wavers and one day hot, one day cold, that's the thing.
So
Hero.
God's original plan was, you're going to be my witnesses. The children of Israel were going to be the witnesses, and that he was going to drive them out, going to send hornets, going to send all different things to make them do this. Randall, you had your hand up.
Yes, you said that they lost respect for him. I agree with you there. But still, there was fear, because when the spies went into the land and talked to Rahab, she says, yes, they fear you. That's what she said. So they must still have a fear of the people.
There must have still been some fear.
Yes.
I think that's very true, Randall, that there were still the ones that had listened to all the prophets. Because remember, we had prophets right up until we had kings. So there were a lot of prophets that had been alive during that whole stretch. We don't have every single one of them in here, but there were always prophets ready to pass along the wisdom. Okay, and then of course we were blessed with some pretty big prophets and a whole bunch of minor prophets during the times that they did have kings, and they continued to guide us and direct us. I want to touch on, we have only 5 more minutes. I want to touch on this idea of the story on Thursday's lesson, the Prince of Peace. God, who's the Prince of Peace? Who do we think of? Think of Jesus, don't we? We have a lot of texts that refer to him as the Prince of Peace. Where was this? Okay, shoot, I'm not going to get to this part. I was really wanting to get to Okay. The idea of the war with Syria. Do you remember that story, the Syrian army? How many of you remember it? Want to give me a synopsis of it? Go ahead, Randall.
Which I think it goes very personal with Hezekiah, right? And he knew that they were coming at right at the door. And that's God. Well, so the Lord says, you know what, I will turn. Then the prophet
Elisha.
came to him and said, he will not seek them. But remember what happened was I got they were talking about his servant. That's what it was. His servant. He says, "Look, what are we going to do?"
He didn't have enough
He
faith.
didn't have enough faith. He didn't know, and he prayed. He said, "Open my servant's eyes."
And what did he
And
see?
he seen a whole field full of angels,
Warrior angels
angels on horses
and chariots.
Chariots. Oh my! It was amazing. Yes.
Okay, so let's then move forward in the story, and the battle actually starts. And what happens to the Syrians? They lose their sight.
eyesight.
They lose their eyesight, and they are led
Yes.
blindly into the land of Samaria.
Samaria.
And
Inside the wall.
and then the
Inside
question
the-
that gets asked, what are we going to do with them? Do we slaughter them? And what was the answer?
No, feed them.
Do you slaughter the people that you've already captured?
No.
I mean, is that a godly thing
No.
to do? Once somebody is in handcuffs, but somebody pulled the trigger on them? I mean, they're not supposed to, that's for sure. They are already in a state of submission, right? So what does God, through Elisha, tell them to do?
Feed them. Give them drink. Send them over.
Okay. What text does that remind you of? Any idea? No, what text in the Bible? It reminded me of Proverbs 25. Let's go to it. Now, y'all know I've told you this several times that I read a chapter in Proverbs every single day because they match up to the days in the month. And I've been doing it since 2014. If I miss a day or something, I'll just, whatever day I remember, I read that day. And most of the time, you think how many months there are since 2014. And I've read Proverbs a lot. So this text came to my mind because what have I been doing? Putting the word of God into my mind daily, right? And this text came to me that I thought was really amazing. And this is Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 25. Almost at the end of the month for me when I'm reading it. And we're going to read verses 21 and 22. And Roy, is it Roy?
Yes.
Okay, that's so. Roy, I just met you last week and I wanted to be sure I was, and it's Priscilla. What do you know? Okay, why don't you read for me verses 21 and 22, and if everybody has it, follow along.
If your enemy is hungry, give him food. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coal on his head, or he'll reward.
Okay. How many have wondered what the heck is burning coals on their head have anything to do?
That sounds painful.
Well, it's
No, actually, there's a reason for it. Do you want to hear the reason for it? Back in that part of the country, where did they carry their bundles? On their head, right? We know this. There's still countries that they carry their whatever they're walking with, they carry it on their head. If a person came home after hunting or something and they had been gone for days, they would get home and their house would be cold, no fire. And they didn't bring back fire. They had been gone. And so here they are with a cold house and they want warmth. They go to a neighbor who could very easily be an enemy. Somebody that they didn't like, somebody they didn't get along with. Go to them and ask for food, ask for coals, some pieces of coals. And that person would generously put coals into a wet towel, put it up on his head, and he would go home and heat his own home. So the idea of heaping coals on your enemy's head is showing a good thing. It's showing a good thing that you're feeding them, you're giving them water, and then you're even having them a way to go home and have heat in their house.
Extra mile.
Going the extra mile, that's right. So when we think about that, we know that we are, let me see, is my piano player, oh, she's in her room, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go a few extra minutes. There's something else I wanna go over. So heaping coals that isn't something bad. You aren't putting fire into your enemy's head.
That's very interesting.
Because you can't feed them and water them and then burn them up. So that's kind of a way to look at it, but that wasn't a contradictory thing back then. That was actually a good thing. Hi, how are you? Good. All right, so let's go into something here that I just want to touch on. And this is where I said that we were going to get into the idea of God's character to balance out what we read in the Old Testament. All the battles and the divine wars and the wars that God fought against evil. One is, this is, despite being less popular topic today, God's wrath cannot be overlooked as it is mentioned. Listen to this. God's wrath is mentioned 580 times in the Old Testament and 100 times in the New Testament. And divine wrath is rooted in 4 memorable aspects of God's character. So let's go over them very quickly. We only have a minute. First, God is holy. God is holy. That is one of his characters. And it says, Israel is called to be holy because the Lord is holy. Throughout the book of Isaiah, God is referred to as the Holy One of Israel 27 times. The angels declare holy, holy, holy in his presence. His holiness sets him apart from sinful human beings. We are not capable of being holy on our own at all. Not at all possible, but God is holy. And when we take all these considerations, all these character things into consideration to balance out what we know about the Old Testament, then we have the big picture and we can answer the question to people who want to know why. The second one is God is righteous. David affirms, for the Lord is righteous. He loves righteousness. His countenance beholds the upright. Even in the human sphere, we hope justice is served. It's interesting to see how people rightly demand justice when faced with injustice. We want justice, don't we? We absolutely do. And then the next one, the third one, is God creates beings with free will. And this is where we know that we have the chance to either stay on God's side or we truly have the choice to not stay on God's side. It is one or the other. But we were given that as a gift from God. And finally, God is love. Yes, I have loved you with everlasting love. Indifference, not wrath, is the opposite of love. I just wanted to point out that we have a lot of things in the Bible that way more things that confirm God's character than the wars in the Old Testament. And we need to know how to keep that in mind at all times so that we don't get wrapped up in negative conversations with people that want to somehow or another beat us up because we believe in both the Old and the New Testament as God's divine word for us. And this is what guides us every day. And we have to put this in our minds, in our hearts every day because there's a lot of evil out there. And we need to have fighting against, a way to fight against. Okay, do I have a volunteer for closing prayer? Anybody want to close our prayer? Anybody?
I will.
Okay, thank you, Randall.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this lesson. Teaching, Spirit, guide, this lesson. Pray now you be.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your participation. And where were you guys? A little hard to get started on a cold morning, right?
No,